10 a.m. on September 25th, 1890, the Trans-North American race, the Steel Ball Run, has finally begun!
Hello everyone, xForts here, and welcome to a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure discussion video. Today we have another highly requested episode of Standoff between Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable's Koichi Hirose, and Part 7, Steel Ball Run's Sandman, also referred to by his birth name, Soundman, along with their stands Echoes and In a Silent Way. Both of these stands are badass, and for the most part, they're all about sound. Both of these stands can manipulate and attack their opponents physically using sound, but at the same time, both of these stands are unique to their own and function in a different way. We will be analyzing both of these stands and then comparing them in order to come to a conclusion to decide which sound-based stand is superior. The first stand we'll be analyzing is Koichi's Echoes. Echoes is a very unique stand in the sense that it has the ability to grow and evolve alongside its user. The stand Echoes is made up of 3 different evolutions: Echoes Act 1, Echoes Act 2, and Echoes Act 3. And each time the stand evolves, it gains objectively better powers along with a new appearance. So technically, Echoes is really 3 stands in one, because Koichi has the ability to evolve and devolve his stand at any point, but he can only do this after he's reached the final act, being Act 3. So starting off, the first act we'll look at is of course Echoes Act 1. Act 1 has the ability of Sound Maker. It can write a sound effect on anything, including human flesh, and whatever sound Koichi writes will repeat over and over again with increasing volume, and it can shoot the sound effect through its hands or tail. For example, he can just make a very loud noise in an opponent's head to disorient them, or to implant something in someone's head like "trust me" in order to make his mother trust him. Act 1 has the longest range out of any of the other acts, and it is 50 meters. A huge downside to this ability though is that it can be broken through sheer willpower, as we saw Yukako completely dispel this effect just because of her obsession with Koichi. And finally, for Act 1, we have its appearance. It sort of resembles a turtle with sort of a spike on the top of its shell, along with its signature eyes, its 2 arms, and also a beak for a mouth. The back legs that I'll refer to him as have a resemblance of the Fool, in a sense that they are just really wheels instead of legs. And Act 1 also has a pretty long pattern tail on it. Echoes Act 1 is a very interesting design. Also, each act of course has different stand stats because they have different abilities. So the stand stats for Echoes Act 1 is an E in destructive power, E in speed, B in range, B in durability, C in precision, and A in development potential. On to Echoes Act 2. For its appearance, it's very similar to Act 1, except you can see it's growing into more of a humanoid type figure. It gains legs instead of its wheels, its tail grows as well and also has a larger point at the end, and instead of a torso, it really just has a giant head which sort of has a shell around it, and of course it keeps its signature eyes. On to Act 2's abilities. They're almost identical to Act 1's Sound Maker, except instead of leaving a mental effect on the opponent, you're leaving a physical effect on the opponent. So the process is exactly the same. All Echoes has to do is write a sound effect on any surface, but in this case, the opponent will feel the sound effect instead of hearing it. So some examples of this ability in practice is that Koichi in his stand can turn a sharp rock into an elastic trampoline, or make doors push people back and also knock them down. One of Act 2's most iconic sound effects was its sizzle in order to increase the heat of an object. And considering this stand has the ability to make a sound effect on anything, its possibilities are almost limitless. And with each evolution, this stand's speed increases drastically, so Act 2 is much faster than Act 1. On to Act 2's stand stats. It has a C in destructive power, D in speed, B in range, B in durability, C in precision, and A in development potential. Moving on to the last evolution of Echoes, we have Act 3, and objectively the most badass. Act 3 is the only act that has a personality, and the personality that it does have is that he's pretty independent and loves swearing, with some of his most notable quotes being "mission fucking accomplished" and also "shit." S-H-I-T. Act 3's appearance is of course the most humanoid out of all of the acts, and has those turtle-like shell pieces scattered throughout its body that sort of resemble armor. The tail is drastically smaller and just pretty much as a spike. Act 3 also has a little bit of clothing. He wears a cloth draped around his waist that has a number 3 printed on it. Unlike Echoes Act 1 and Act 2, Act 3 does not have the ability to fly, and his range is also much shorter. But however, Act 3 is extremely fast, much faster than anything Act 1 and Act 2 could do. Onto its ability, abilities, one thing unique about Act 3 is that it actually carries over an ability, being Soundmaker Act 2. So along with that ability, it also has 3 freeze. Act 3 will rapidly punch the target in order to give it a freezing effect. This works by just increasing the weight of the target. And similar to Soundmaker Act 2, it can only affect one target at a time. The amount of weight that 3 freeze actually adds is around 40 to 50 kilograms, which is around 90 to 110 pounds. And this effect only lasts as long as the target remains within 5 meters of Act 3. And the closer the target gets to the user and the stand, the more weight is added. Echo's Act 3 stand stats are a B in destructive power, B in speed, C in range, B in durability, C in precision, and A in development potential. Moving on to Koichi and Echo's highlight moment, it has to be the fight against Sheer Heart Attack and also the moments leading up to it. So before the fight against Sheer Heart Attack actually took place, it was just Jotaro and Koichi was absolutely terrified of this stand, and then eventually Sheer Heart Attack managed to take out Jotaro, someone who Koichi thought was so amazing and so much more powerful than him. So now Koichi, with just Echo's Act 1 and 2, had to defend himself from Sheer Heart Attack while protecting Jotaro's life. And during this moment, he used his stand very effectively and was very capable of defending himself and Jotaro. But eventually, things took a wrong turn, and Koichi was staring into the eyes of death and also Sheer Heart Attack at the same time. And in that moment, he awakened Echo's Act 3 and was able to protect himself and Jotaro for a second time. I thought this moment was great for Koichi's character, and of course, it evolved his stand to who we all know and love, Act 3. Now, to move on to the next analysis, we will be looking at Sandman's stand in a silent way. Starting off with appearance, In a Silent Way is a humanoid type stand that wears clothing and also lots of different accessories that come from Native American culture. In a Silent Way's most notable accessory is its war bonnet, and most of its design comes from Native American wall art and also other paintings. This stand also appears to be wearing a mask that covers half of its face, with the lower half of its face resembling sort of a skeleton. And I have to throw in there that this stand is exceptionally badass. In a Silent Way is also more of a conventional stand when compared to Koichi's Echoes. It does not have multiple acts and also has just a couple abilities. In a Silent Way's most notable ability is its sound construction. Sandman is able to use his stand to manipulate and store sounds inside objects. And when someone comes in contact with an object that has a sound stored inside it, the sound will be released. And this can be very deadly because the characteristics of the sound can be either burning, cutting, stabbing, jabbing, or tearing, and really any other adjectives that would induce pain. As we saw in Steel Ball Run, the most effective way to use In the Silent Way was to get your opponent inside water, as the sounds can travel much faster than on any other surface. And also the sounds can travel very stealthily in the water as well. One of the deadliest aspects of this stand is that it'd be great for assassination because the people cannot know that the sounds are stored in objects and it's completely unperceivable to any human. In a Silent Way's secondary ability is its sound shield. This ability works as a defensive capability for the stand and the user, and that's always a major plus when any stand has defensive capabilities. So the way that sound shield works is that it's pretty much the same as sound construction, but in a defensive manner. For example, if Sandman has any sort of projectiles coming towards him that are dangerous, he can just swing a knife that makes a swooshing sound effect in the air, and that will deflect the oncoming objects. This is a great defensive capability, so pretty much as long as you can react to anything coming at you, you can deflect it. There was also another ability we saw from In a Silent Way, and that was its ability to have a team attack. Sandman teaming up with Diego Brando in his stand Scary Monsters, he was able to put the sounds onto the monsters and charge them at targets. This could be a very effective ability, but only works if you have a partner that has a stand such as Scary Monsters. Now onto In a Silent Way stand stats, a C in destructive power, C in speed, D in range, A in durability, D in precision, and B in development potential. As for In a Silent Way's highlight moment, it really only had one fight in all of Steel Ball Run, and that was Sandman and Diego against Johnny and Gyro. But in this battle, there were some great moments. Obviously, before the battle began, Gyro wrote his song. Pizza mozzarella, pizza mozzarella. But then shortly after that, there was sort of a stealth attack by Sandman that Gyro and Johnny were not able to comprehend and really didn't know what was happening. And then later on in the fight, when Sandman was able to get Gyro and Johnny in the water, he was able to split Gyro's body in half, because although Gyro did create a rotation that was able to deflect the solid sounds, there were also more stealth sounds that intersected on the solid sounds that Gyro could not account for and were not perceptible to him. And ultimately, that's what ended up cutting him in half. And also the dialogue between Johnny and Sandman Sandman, and also their fight between their stand Tusk and In a Silent Way was also great. So now that we've analyzed both of these stands, Koichi's Echoes and Sandman's In a Silent Way, we can compare the two, looking at their different strengths and weaknesses to come to a conclusion and decide which sound-based stand is superior. So when we look at the versatility of these two stands, it's pretty obvious that Koichi's Echoes is way more versatile than In a Silent Way. I mean, it's fair to say that Act 2 is pretty much just a less useful version of In a Silent Way, but with Act 1 he has the ability to disorient, distract, and also transmit messages to people through their head. And Act 3 is incredibly fast at close range and also has the ability to slow things down and almost leave you just immobile. So although In a Silent Way does not have the abilities of Koichi's Act 1 and Act 3, the abilities that it does have that are comparable to Koichi's Act 2 are way better. So although Echoes does have the abilities of Act 1 and Act 3 that In a Silent Way does not have, In a Silent Way has one major ability that completely overshadows itself above Echoes. And that's the fact that In a Silent Way can place multiple sounds on multiple objects and is not limited to just one. So the way it seems is that In a Silent Way has the ability to just make limitless amounts of sounds and place them on limitless amounts of objects. As we saw, he stored sounds on the barn, on the axe, and also a plethora of different monsters and animals around the area. When Koichi, on the other hand, would only have the capabilities of placing one sound on one object, and that falls so short when you compare it to Sandman's abilities. So yeah, In a Silent Way, he can't transmit sounds into people's heads and he can't slow people down, but he doesn't really need that when he has this crazy ability of placing so many sounds everywhere. Johnny and Gyro also stated that he was such an annoying opponent because if he wanted to, he could just booby trap an entire area, and essentially that's kind of what he did. And if it wasn't for Hot Pants' ability to heal people, Gyro would have died right there at the hands of Sandman. Sandman also has the ability to move sounds throughout the object that they're placed on. For example, if the sounds are placed in a body of water, the sounds can move freely through that object at incredibly high speeds if it's only water though. But the sounds can still move on other surfaces, just not as rapidly. And when we compare that to Koichi's Echoes, Echoes sounds cannot move throughout the object that they're placed on and they are fixed and stationary. Echoes also falls short when compared to In a Silent Way in the defensive capabilities. In a Silent Way's sound shield is incredibly effective, and we saw it deflect things like Johnny's nail bullets. And like I mentioned, as long as In a Silent Way and Sandman have a fast enough reaction time, they can deflect anything. And when we look at Echoes, we never really saw Koichi use his stand in any crazy defensive ways like we saw Sandman use it. But Koichi is a very clever and very smart character, and with his stand having so many different abilities, I'm sure he could come up with some sort of idea to make his stand have a defensive capability that could be even better than Sandman's. But Koichi's freeze technique might be a defensive capability in a way because he can just freeze an opponent and stop them from coming towards him. But in order to do that, you have to have physical contact with the opponent. Both of these stands, Echoes and In a Silent Way, have so many strengths but not really a lot of weaknesses. For example, In a Silent Way, its only weaknesses, I guess, are its semi-close range and also its weak precision. But it has so much destructive capability, so many possibilities it can use with its sounds, and also incredible defensive capabilities using its sounds as well. When Echoes, on the other hand, has such a clever user, Koichi, who can think of so many things, but I guess Echoes' only flaw are its weak defensive capabilities. Like we saw in Echoes Act 3's fight against Kira, he really didn't have any way to defend himself and just had to take the punches. So when it comes down to deciding which stand is superior in a combat situation, I have to give it to In a Silent Way. This stand's ability to place multiple sounds on multiple objects is so incredible, and it has so many different capabilities for either assassination or head-on fights, and that makes for incredible destructive power. In a Silent Way is a much more brutal and a much more deadly stand than Echoes. When Echoes, on the other hand, is incredibly versatile and does have a ton of different abilities that could be more useful than In a Silent Way depending on the situation. But I feel like Echoes is much more of a support type stand, as we mostly see Koichi fighting alongside other people using his stand in a support way, using his sounds and his freeze ability to help out his friends in their stands. So overall, to conclude this video, in my personal opinion, I think In a Silent Way is a much more superior stand than Echoes, although Echoes is more versatile and could be useful in other situations that aren't just combat, but stands are mostly used for combat, so I'm going to give it to In a Silent Way. There will be a card in the top right where you guys can vote on which stand you think is superior. So that was this episode of Standoff, Koichi and Echoes versus Sandman and In a Silent Way. I know a lot of people might get upset because I'm not referring to Sandman as Soundman. Although Soundman is his birth name, he's referred to as Sandman for most of the series, so I'm just going to stick with that. Thank you guys so much for checking out yet another highly requested episode of Standoff, and also thank you for requesting matchups for the series. I would love to hear more requests for you guys, but before you request something, make sure you check the playlist so you're not requesting something I've already made. Be sure to like this video if I occupied your boredom for a little bit, or if you just enjoyed it. And also subscribe for more JoJo's Bizarre Adventure content.